So up to challenge 20. This is the first time that you'll actually look at a challenge and think, this is actually quite difficult to do if you do it properly, because you'd have to start using things called data structures. So for example, this little table where it's got J Smith, P Williams and large, medium, small, etc. That is all a group of data, and we could store that into something called an array. I mean, if we're getting really technical, because there are different types of data used here, we'd have to put it into a list instead, because an array can only really be used for the same type of data. So what we'd have to do is set up a list if you were going to do this properly, and you'd have to do some operations on the list. So we'd have to loop through all the contents of the list and read the values that are stored in that list. Now for this purpose at challenge 20, you're not really going to be ready to do something like that. So I'm going to go for more of an easier version. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put the values in as inputs instead, as we've been doing all along. So if we follow the iPod process again, we need to think about what inputs are going to be put into this particular algorithm. So the first thing that we're going to need to input is name, and we're going to ask them for the person's name. Notice that I've put the strings in at the top so that we know that this is going to get outputted to the screen and ask the user to input a value. The other inputs that we're going to need is how many large pizzas have they bought. So I could create a large a variable called large with a nice sensible name, and we're going to ask for that to be input. Now when we look at what values are actually stored for this particular variable, they're going to be integers because they're all whole numbers. So we're going to put int input, just like we have on a number of occasions so far in these algorithms. And this time we're going to put an output to the screen. How many large pizzas have you ordered? We don't actually know who's going to fill this in. It could be a member of staff. So instead of how many large pizzas have you ordered, I'm going to put have been ordered instead. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this line of code, and I'm going to paste it twice, save myself a lot of time, and I am going to swap the variable names for medium, small, and all I'm going to do is change the output here to medium and small. So now we've got most of these values done. We've got one more left. And this time we can do a couple of things. For this purpose, I'm going to keep it nice and simple and just ask for an input. Have or is there already a loyalty card? And then to make this a little bit more efficient, so that they input the right data and don't just type in the word yes or no or don't know or anything like that, I'm going to put Y or N so that they know to type in either a Y or an N. So that's all about inputs, and we know that nowadays when we get to the exam we're going to have similar algorithm challenges. We're going to get similar things like this, and we need to just keep following this process. We need to look at what the inputs are going to be. The program or the algorithm cannot function without having some sort of input coming into the program. So now we've got our input sorted, we need to look at what the processes are going to be. Some people like to check what the output is first, so we could leave a little gap and just say what the output is at the end, or we could at least start to think about what the output's going to be. So we could maybe set loyalty card, could be an output. We could also have something like number of pizzas, could be an output. We're going to put underscores in because we can't have spaces. Or we could have total pizzas. So these things are going to be output by this algorithm. It wants us to let them know whether they've got the loyalty card or if they've been removed. And we want them to know if they've ordered enough pizzas or not. So there is just a little bit of thought into what the outputs could be. Now during this stage in the middle, we need to think about what the process is. But sometimes we also have some iteration to go on as well. So in order to think about what the process is going to be, we need to have another little read of what the challenge actually says. So it's saying to go through the customer orders. So in this particular case, we're going for the easy option, and we're going to read through the customer order by putting these inputs in. So that's just going to process what the order is step by step. Then what we're going to do is it's going to send a loyalty card if they do not already have one. So we need to check whether they already have one or not. But we also need to check if they've ordered enough pizzas. And it says they need to order more than 20 pizzas in a year. So basically, there's a couple of things that we need to do. The first thing is that we need to do a check. So in order to do a check, we need to actually calculate how many pizzas they've got in the first place. So our first little process that we're going to do is add up all of the pizzas that they have ordered. So we're just going to do large plus medium plus small. And that's going to take all of these inputs and it's going to add them all together, and it's going to assign it to this variable called total pizzas. Now we can use this variable to do a logical check. So we're going to do an if statement, and we're going to check if total pizzas is greater than 20. Okay? If it's greater than 20, then they qualify for the loyalty card. So what we could do is, just to keep it nice and simple, we could literally put loyalty card equals true. And that's just going to set the value for loyalty card to true, and we can use that later on. Or what we could do, to keep it even simpler in case anyone's confused, we could just put print you have qualified for a loyalty card. And it mentions about being sent one, so we could just put you will get this in the post. Okay, so if they've ordered 20 pizzas, sorry, more than 20 pizzas because it's greater than, we're going to output this message to them and basically let them know that they've qualified for a loyalty card. We could set the value of loyalty card up in this input, so we could say that if they say yes, set it to true, if they say no, set it to false, and we could use that as well. So what we're going to do is the next check. It says if they already have one. So if they've already got a loyalty card but they haven't ordered enough pizzas, so basically if they haven't ordered more than 20 pizzas, then we're going to do another check. So if they haven't ordered more than 20 pizzas, we're going to check if they've got a loyalty card or not. So if card equals yes, we're going to say print your loyalty card has been revoked. So revoked just means like removed, cut off, so I'll put removed to make it easier. Okay, so that essentially is saying that if this condition here is not true, then we move on to this next bit and we're going to do this. So if card is equal to yes, we're going to remove the loyalty card, else basically do nothing. So what we could do is copy this output and just change it to say you did not qualify for a loyalty card. think that's all of the different logical things that we need to figure out. If they've done more than 20 pizzas, then tell them they've got a loyalty card. Suppose you could say that if they've ordered 20 pizzas and they've already got one, they've already got a loyalty card, but it's just going to do the same thing. So the only thing that we're not covering really is if they've already got a loyalty card, you don't want to tell them that they're going to get this in the post. So one thing that we could do is do another check here and say if card equals no, then output this, and if card equals yes, so in other words the opposite, then we say you have retained your loyalty card. That just means that they've kept hold of it. So there's a number of different ways you can do this. You might be thinking, I've done all of this backwards. You might be thinking, why have you done it so complicated? You might be thinking, there's easier ways of doing it. But doing it this way is essentially just saying, there's my inputs, this is my process, and then based on that process, I've got my outputs and decisions here. So this is my decision. First one, are total pizzas greater than 20? Yes. So if we say 25, for example, then the card will go on to the next check. We check if they've already got a card. If they haven't, then we say you've qualified for one. And if they have got a card, then we say you've retained your loyalty card. Now you could do that the other way round instead, if that makes it easier for you. So you could swap that for this particular value here, and you could move this to there instead and swap that for a Y. So if they've got a loyalty card, you say you've retained your loyalty card, otherwise you say you've qualified for one. Then what you'd have to do is say, otherwise I want you to do this check. If they don't have a loyalty card, if they do have a loyalty card, then your card's been removed. Otherwise, you did not qualify for a loyalty card. So this is our little program. That basic way of doing it. I'm going to save this. As challenge 20. I'm just going to test it just to make sure I've got all my indentation correct. So straight away, dead common error. You've got to make sure that you close every bracket that you open. I'm always forgetting to do this. So what is the person's name? John. How many large pizzas have been ordered? 20. How many medium? 4. How many small? 2. Is there already a loyalty card? Yes. You have retained your loyalty card. So we can say straight away that we've got 26 pizzas and we've got a loyalty card, so we retain the loyalty card. If we do another test just to make sure that it works for other values, so we could say Bill, and we could say he's only got 3 large, 2 medium and 3 small. He does have a loyalty card, but it's been removed because he didn't order enough pizzas. So we can see there that that's working. Now what I was trying to explain earlier is all of this input at the top, that could be done automatically. So at this point now, if you're happy with that, you are pleased with your progress and you think you're doing well and you don't want to go any more complicated, then you could stop this video. If you want to see another way of doing this, we could look into how we are going to do that. So rather than sit and type all the code out, I'm going to show you one that I already made. So I've got one called harder here, and on the right hand side of this screen now we can see the code. So what I've done is I've created a list at the top, and we know that when we create a list we use equals and use square brackets to create a list. Now what this does is this is a 2-dimensional list. We've added in an extra dimension. So inside that list we're creating another list inside, and then another list inside, And within each of these smaller lists, we're putting all of the values that are held in this table over here. So where we've got customer name Smith J, large, medium, that is these values being populated into this smaller list. Then we're going to use what we call a count controlled loop. So we're going to look through that whole data structure there, and we're going to analyse the data as we go through. There's a number of things going on here that we need to look at. So I'm going to move all this down here so you don't worry about it too much. And we're just going to focus on this section. Essentially what we're doing is exactly like before, but instead of asking for all of these variables as inputs, we're going to read these inputs from the data structure instead. The advantage of that is we obviously don't need any input from the user. It's going to automatically take the data. So if you've got a big database full of customers, it can automatically read through them all in one go. So this here is how to create a count controlled loop. We're using for. And the next bit, you might see this quite often in code where it just says I. Now I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it stands for iteration or index, and it essentially means the same thing. What iteration number is it, or what is the index that we're starting from? This is always going to be 0. So this particular value here, you can put whatever name that you want. So if it makes it easier, you could put for item. So for item that's in the list, and then every time you refer to I, you'd have to replace it with item. Because when we change one variable name, we need to change all of the others that go with it, otherwise it will get confused. So any reference to I, if we change it to item, that might make it a little bit easier for you. Okay, the next bit is in range. So for item in range, this is something that we use to say what count we want. So in these brackets here, you could put any number in. You could say 500, and it will repeat all of this code 500 times. If you change it to 10, it will do it 10 times, and so on. We can also say what we want it to start from. So you could say you want it to start from the second item in the list and end at the 10th item in the list. There's a variety of different options that we can do. By using this function, len, short for length, orders, it's going to basically put a number in here based on how many items are in the list. So at the moment there's 2 items in the list, so it's going to repeat this code twice. The advantage of doing that is if I add more items into this list, it will automatically know how many times to repeat this code, because this value here will change to 3, 4, 5, however many items I put in. Moving down the line then, so we've got this variable called name, and that's going to get populated by whatever is in this list at these specific locations. So this is the bit where some people get a little bit confused. The first time that this loop of code runs, item, the value for item is 0 the first time round, because it starts from 0. So every time we make a reference to item, it's talking about 0. So the first time we run this loop, orders 0, 0 goes to the first item that's in the list, and it looks at the first item that's in the sublist. So the way that lists and arrays work is the first item here is referred to as 0, the next one is referred to as 1, and the next one's referred to as 2, etc. If you want to learn more about variables and arrays and lists and things, you can look at some of the other videos that discuss arrays, and it might make a little bit more sense. Essentially what we're saying is that the first time we run this loop, we want to look at this list and we want to look at that first item, and we're going to take that item there and we're going to apply it to name. The next line does exactly the same thing, but this time we're looking at the next item along, and it's the number 5. Medium does the same, but we're looking at 6. Small does the same, but we're looking at 1. Card does the same, but we're looking at no. So all of those items have now been populated automatically. We can do the same process as before, where we add up how many pizzas they've got. And we can do similar logical tests as before as well, where we compare the total number of pizzas and we check to see whether the value in the list is yes or no. And it's just going to keep repeating that code until we get to the end of the list. So the next time round, once it gets to here, in this particular part here, that code is then complete and it will increment item by 1. So then item is 1. And the next time we go through the code, item gets replaced with 1, item gets replaced with 1, and it means it's going to look at the next full item in the list, which is this. So that's how we can do a count controlled loop to search through a list of data. And it's basically doing the exact same thing as the other program before, but we're doing it all in one go. We can also do fancy things with lists. So this little bottom section here is basically going to remove someone from the list if they don't qualify for a loyalty card. So we're basically just going to look at this item, so orders number 4, and we're going to look for if that value is no, and if it's now no, we're going to remove that whole item from the list. So at this point you wouldn't be expected to understand any of this really, but just know that that's the whole purpose of it. So we're going to just remove this whole thing, this whole item here from the list, because he doesn't have a loyalty card anymore.